Yes, Mr. Benjamin, author of The Age of Sacred Terror, an excellent book.
And other pro-Zionist tracts. Ari, there is a theory now being put out by at least two very distinguished American Jewish retired diplomats who were at the forefront of the Middle East peace process, that the United States has erred, and I'm referring to Dan Kurtzer, or I should say Rabbi Dan Kurtzer, since he was the dean of students at Yeshiva University, and Aaron Miller, that America has erred in not practicing tough love with Israel, that the love is there, but there's not enough toughness, and that in particular in the Bush administration, being uncritical of Israeli actions has not served Israeli interests, particularly on settlements, but in other areas as well, and being absent from the peace process, as Ariel Sharon wanted us to be, and as George Bush also wanted to be, has really not helped anyone. So my question to you is, would it not be more useful for Israel in the next term, in the next presidential term, to have a president who's prepared to be a different point on a triangle between Israelis and Arabs than to be so close to Israel that he can't broker a deal?
No, I don't. Where should I begin? First of all, I would expect the two gentlemen, respected gentlemen you referred to, and the others who led the failed process of the 90s to give a very honest, intellectually honest account of their failure. We've seen Israeli governments willing to take risks. We've seen American administration. We've seen the person himself yesterday afternoon here, willing to do everything in an unprecedented and almost irrational way in order to bring about Israeli-Palestinian peace, and that failed. And if there's one point that I'm really not tolerant about is the narrative regarding what happened there. In my mind, the fact that when the President of the United States was looking for Mr. Yasser Arafat to give him an answer, to bringing some sort of alternative peace plan to the one he produced, and he could not find it for days. And we never got the alternative, reasonable, fair Palestinian peace plan. You don't want what we offered, which was unprecedented at the time. Where is what you suggest? We never saw that. And therefore, I think that with this coming change of administration, I would expect people to be honest about the record of the 90s and then to judge what happened in the last 8 years. And I've said it in the evening, 2 evenings ago, but I'll repeat myself. I think that we had two major flawed ideas about the Middle East. We had the new Middle East idea of Oslo of the 90s, and we had the new Middle East idea of George Bush in the 2000s. Both ideas were flawed, although I know this is not going to be very popular with this audience. Both were in a sense benign. Both, with all the mistakes and the tragedy and the catastrophe that George Bush brought about, I think that the idea was not something to be dismissed at all, because the need eventually to have a democratic Middle East is there. But the problem with these two ideas was that they were too ambitious, too revolutionary, and they did not look at the facts on the ground. So Oslo failed because of that, because of the tension between the high rhetorics and the ambition that was completely out of touch with the reality on the ground, and Clinton and Barack were the victims of that. And then you had the catastrophe of Iraq, because an idea that in itself is right was promoted in a simplistic, aggressive, unexcusable way. And therefore, when the new administration is going to walk in, I think it needs to look carefully at the last 15 years. But we did not have just 5 years of failure. We had 15 years of failing to deal with the Middle East. And what is needed, in my mind, is some sort of synthetic approach which understands, which takes the lessons of all we've learned. And when I hear people that actually what's behind what you asked, they actually want to say, let's go back to where we were in 1999 and just impose it on Israel because Israel is the villain. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. This is not the right approach because, as I said before, the process must be a process of, yes, putting pressure on Israel to retreat in a cautious and reasonable way, but creating this new Palestinian entity as a reliable and mature entity.